But another thing you're going to want to check out is his wide receiver ranking list that Dov Kleiman has been coming out with. And it's not his ranking, but it's, again, this is according to executives, players, coaches, and scouts. These are the top 10 wide receivers according to, again, executives, players, coaches, and scouts. And the reason why I wanted to bring this up is because we just talked last week about top 10 wide receivers, who we have in the top 10, who we don't have in the top 10. This isn't Madden ratings. So get that out of your head. I know Amon-Ra St. Brown was 19th on Madden. This is actually, much more, you take this more into consideration than Madden, I'll say that. But there are some things I do have a problem with this list. But Sam, you see the list, no Amon-Ra St. Brown, not even an honorable mention. Not even an honorable mention. Before I, completely go off, what say you, Sam Flannel, your reaction to this list? How dirty did they do Amon-Ra St. Brown here?
I mean, they did Amon-Ra St. Brown extremely dirty, especially not even to have him on the honorable mention, because for me, I have him in my top 10, but I have him at number 10. If they would have at least put him in the honorable mention, I wouldn't see it as just this blatant slap in the face, but the fact that they didn't even do that is just insane to me. And before I give you a couple of numbers, would we all agree in this room that availability is as important of a skill as you can have as an NFL football player?
Yeah,
yes?
100%. Because if you're not available and you have talent, you can't show the talent.
All right, so given that context, I am going to read you quite a few numbers that prove that Amon-Ra St. Brown should absolutely be ranked higher. So of the top 10 receivers that they listed, Amon-Ra St. Brown had more receptions last season than Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp, Jamar Chase, DK Metcalf, and Terry McLaurin. That's pretty good, I would say.
That is really good.
He had more receiving yards than DK Metcalf, Jamar Chase, and Cooper Kupp. The reason I mentioned health, because Jamar Chase and Cooper Kupp obviously weren't healthy for a lot of the year. But in terms of the honorable mentions that they list, Amon-Ra St. Brown had more receptions than any single of the honorable mentions. Any single one of them, and he's not even on that list. He had more receiving yards last season than Mike Evans, Deebo Samuel, T. Higgins, and Garrett Wilson. He actually had less receiving yards than Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith, but this is where you have to include some context, because Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle got to play with they were number 2 wide receivers that got to play across from 2 true number 1s, who Tyreek Hill was their 4th rated and A.J. Brown was the 7th rated, and those were the number 1s in the systems in which Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith played. And when you look at what Amon-Ra St. Brown did last season for the Lions, he was their receiving core pretty much, at least when it comes to the production. Amon-Ra St. Brown had 106 receptions. The next highest Detroit Lion had 48, more than double, and that was DeAndre Swift of all people. Amon-Ra St. Brown had 1,161 receiving yards. The next closest was none other than Khalif Raymond of all people with 616. So you see what I'm saying? Amon-Ra St. Brown was the receiving core last year. And when you look at the additional votes, that's where they put Amon-Ra St. Brown, which is completely disrespectful. Amon-Ra St. Brown had more receptions and receiving yards than every other wide receiver listed in the additional votes. So I'm going to compare how Amon-Ra St. Brown should be feeling to a scene in one of my favorite movies, Rocky, when Rocky had his first date with Adrian and they went back to the apartment. And at one point, Adrian was just kind of like, I don't belong here. That's how Amon-Ra St. Brown should feel. He should be right up to the top 10, the lower part of the top 10, but certainly above Terry McLaurin and DK Metcalf for now. He should be nowhere near additional votes. It is blatant disrespect. And Amon-Ra St. Brown, it's just going to build that chip on his shoulder, the chip that he has carried for his entire career since being drafted in the 4th round. I can't wait to see how he responds, but at some point, people need to put respect on Amon-Ra St. Brown's name. He has earned it.
Yeah, and the reason why I wanted to bring this list up is to have the conversation, because this is the time for projection. This is the time for conversation before the season. So it's not just reacting to a top 10 list. It's where do you think Amon-Ra St. Brown can come or go in this ranking list? Does he rise? Does he enter the top 10 officially? Do you think he's top 5? Could he be top 7? Because when you look at Amon-Ra St. Brown the last 2 seasons, he's tied for a first in NFL history in the most receptions through the first 2 seasons. The most catches. Like, think about that for a second. And we're not even discussing his rookie season, which he got a majority of those yards in the second half. Last year, basically almost 1,200 yards, just under 10 touchdowns. What he did last year was unbelievable. But the thing that goes, and I think that goes over people's heads when you talk about Amon-Ra St. Brown, is he's not flashy. And that's the biggest thing that, frustrates me is he might not be flashy, but the guy gets a job done every single time. You need a catch on 3rd down, 3rd and 10. You need a 1st down. Who do you go to? Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's always open. He doesn't have any drops. Never does. So when you think about the best wide receivers, if you don't drop the football and you're always open, I feel like those are the 2 most important things to playing receivers, Sam. And he does those at an extremely high level.
Absolutely.
He might not be the burner. He might not be the big play guy who makes these one-hand catches, but he's efficient. And you can't argue the reception stat. Tied for first in NFL history.
And as far as not being a burner yet or not being as flashy, I think that means a whole lot of bupkis, especially when it means to where he should be on this list. I'm not saying he's Justin Jefferson. I'm not saying he's Devontae Adams. I'm not saying he's Jamar Chase. I'm not saying he's Stephon Diggs. I'm not saying that he's A.J. Brown or anything like that. He does belong on this list, though. And especially with what he did last season and even over the last couple of years, I would firmly put him above DK Metcalf and Terry McLaurin. I'm not saying DK Metcalf and Terry McLaurin aren't damn good wide receivers, but Amon-Ra St. Brown over the last couple of years has, I believe, been better than both of them, and I certainly think he's going to be better moving forward. I don't care about flash or anything, and hey, he might add another element to his game going into next year, maybe being more of a down-the-field threat. It wouldn't shock me at all.
And the fact that Garrett Wilson's there after what?
Sure.
What?
One season.
One season, and again, I give him a lot of credit because he played with 4 different quarterbacks: Joe Flacco, Zach Wilson, Mike White. Like it goes on for Garrett Wilson. So I'm not saying what he did last year was incredible, but after one season, you're an honorable mention over Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like that stuff. That's what confuses me. But again, it did say Dov also mentioned on this list that Amon-Ra St. Brown was the #1 vote getter outside of the honorable mentions list. So again, just shy, but he should be there. If anything, he should be in the top 10. But I do think after this season, if I have to give out stats, no Jameson Williams the first 6 games, no DJ Chark, I think Amon-Ra St. Brown is good for 1,300 yards this season. 1,300. You give him close to double-digit touchdowns. That right there, there's no reason why after this season he can't be officially a top 10 respected receiver because. And maybe Amon-Ra St. Brown knew this, but coming to Detroit, unfortunately, you do get underrated consistently, and you get disrespected. It's just how it works. I didn't make up the rules. It is what it is. That's why there's Detroit versus everybody. And people tend to say that a little too much over everything. But this is a great example of that, Lucas. Amon-Ra St. Brown doesn't get the respect he deserves. And I think this season, hopefully, after 1,300 yards, he will.
My question about this whole ranking list is if he's not there, then what level is he on? What receivers are you saying that he's compared to, like Jerry Jeudy and Chris Olave and all these other ones? It's just like what logic when these guys? I think these guys just like watching football, watching highlights, but not actually thinking about what goes into the games when they make these lists. I know these are NFL and execs and scouts and everything, and that's my point. Is this dude was a 4th-round pick? And he's performing better than half the first-round picks of the last 5 years.
It's crazy.
So the fact that you have this man not even in the honorable mentions, where, again, not saying these guys aren't talented, but if talent doesn't get you production, then who cares? If production gets you more than talent, I'll take that all day of the week. And if you're going to – everyone – when Julian Edelman, Wes Welker, when all those Patriot slot receivers were in the league, they were getting hyped up, calling top 10 all the time. But the fact, like you guys said, he's in Detroit, it's just going to take a year. And I honestly don't think there's much more that Amon-Ra can add to his wheelhouse as far as talent. But he can get better and more precise at what he does. So if he keeps doing that, he's going to keep having better production. It's going to be the same talent. So what's it going to take for this guy to actually be considered top 10? Well, I don't know. People just actually watching film. That's all it's going to take because these guys obviously don't do it.
And people are chiming in now. And Jeff Olson says, I think we are overvaluing catches. Yards and touchdowns mean more.
Oh
well, Amon-Ra had more yards and touchdowns than Garrett Wilson, but he didn't make
it.
So, apparently those don't matter either, Jeff Olson.
Yeah, and when you have Jamal Williams having 17 touchdowns and probably 12 of them being from the 5-yard line, and then it's probably not going to lead to as many touchdowns. And
no.
Those catches lead to touchdowns.
Well,
Let's not forget this was a top 5 offense, and he was the top receiver in it.
Well, and for the record, I do think Amon-Ra St. Brown maybe needs to pump those touchdown numbers up because they're actually not as good as you might think. But yeah, it's not just about receptions for Amon-Ra St. Brown. It's also about yards. And when you look at all of the players that they mentioned, as I said earlier in the additional votes, Amon-Ra St. Brown leads all of them in catches and yards last season. And I heard something you said, Jeff, and I kind of found it a little bit of a backhanded compliment. It's like, okay, so in the additional votes, Amon-Ra St. Brown received the most out of them. So that by that definition, Amon-Ra St. Brown is the 17th best wide receiver in the NFL. Thank you for the table scraps. I appreciate that. I'm just going to eat them up like I'm like a dog waiting for it to fall. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. He's the 17th best wide receiver. Get the out of here.
You know, it's funny too when you mention Amon-Ra and you think about moving the chains. You know where he ranks among receivers that when they made catches, it equated to first downs?
Probably very high.
Well, let's read you the top list. So Justin Jefferson, pretty good.
Yes.
He's pretty damn good. Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Listen to that company, folks. Listen to that
so
company.
When you talk about, well, the catches don't mean as much. What about getting first downs? Does that matter?
Matters as much as just about anything in the NFL.
Moving the chains matters, does it? So Amon-Ra is pretty damn good at that. You know, this is on getting the first downs. When the defense knows, hey, we got to stop that guy, that 6-foot dude who runs a 4.6. We got to stop him.
Dude.
And he comes out, still cooks you, still gets open, and makes the catch for a first down. That stuff matters, but hey, who am I? Who am I? I shouldn't have to make these lists. Listen to executive scouts, players, and coaches. And as much as I respect their opinion, this is wrong. And I think this season, I guess the question is, and JB, I'll let you close it out, where do you think he can rank this upcoming season? After a full season, this 17 games coming up, I think he's going to get 1,300 yards. I think he's going to have a great season. Do you think finally he'll get the respect he deserves, or just because of where he plays, he will never will?
I think just because where he plays, he might never get the respect he truly deserves. But from this list, I truly think he deserves to be where Terry McLaurin is, or at least in the honorable mention. I don't know why you would put him outside of this, but during the season, as you said, Jeff, you're expecting 1,300. I'm expecting around 12 or 13, around that same rate as well, too. And I think he could end up top 5. And don't sit here and tell me that he does not have this list in his head right now of all these receivers that they rank or they think are better than he is right now. And during the season, he's going to show you, and he's going to tell you this at the end.
I told you. See, this is why I love this time period. As much as I want football, like I want to watch the NFL, I love this time period because this is where all the conversations start. And I know people think like, man, you guys keep reacting to these lists. No, this is the point of it because we want to get these things straight before the season, like how we feel, what our takes are, where we think Amon-Ra will be at the end of the season. Like, we got to get these out because once the season starts, Sam, you can't make them now.
No.
So we have to get these out before the season. And like I said before, when it's all said and done, 1,300 yards, he's going to show people, and maybe, people will still disrespect him. But on a bigger stage in the playoffs, I think Amon-Ra is going to be a big-time player. And people will see that. Maybe they won't see it when the Lions were 1-6, but they started seeing it when they were 8-2. Think about it this season when they win 11 games and they're hosting a playoff game. You have no choice but to turn on your television if your team's at home and watch the Lions and watch Amon-Ra St. Brown cook your DB.
He will cook
That's what
that
essentially is going to happen.
And you know what? I actually think I'm comfortable enough to say this because I don't think anybody in this room will actually necessarily think this is a crazy take. JB, you kind of mentioned, a couple of you kind of mentioned what you expect Amon-Ra St. Brown to do this upcoming season. Would it shock any of you if Amon-Ra St. Brown was number 1 in receptions next year in the NFL?
No, I wouldn't.
He missed
an
entire game. He missed an entire game and had over 100. So, I mean, I know that that's not necessarily the likely, but it wouldn't shock. Would it shock anybody?
Well, you know what? It might shock. It would shock
Okay.
Lucas because Sam Laporta has to get his, 100.
That too.
He has to get his 70
There it
catches.
is.
Very much. And there's a bad man out in Vegas right now named
Yeah, like
Devontae Adams,
Sam
who's gonna
Laporta has to
fed
get his
like a
800,
fucking horse.
900 yards as well.
I mean, Sam Laporta, even if he doesn't have to have the most receptions. He's still going to have 800, 900 yards, maybe on like 20 catches.
Hey, Lucas, Devontae Adams is a very bad man. Devontae Adams had less receptions last season than Amon-Ra St. Brown. That's an objective fact.
They're not going to be feeding Josh Jacobs like they did last year. That's a fact. And Josh Jacobs might not even be stepping on the field this year for him.
Oh,
I mean, that's all well and good. I'm just saying there's been a proof. There's been a sample size.
I'm just saying it would shock me. It's not a bad shock, but it would shock me. And it's not like, oh my God, why did this happen? I think he could be top 5 for sure. Like, that wouldn't shock me, but numero uno, it would.
Like you said, it's hard to lead the league in receptions when Sam Laporta takes like 70 of those. You know, because he's
Brock Wright too.
I mean, because Lucas, if he's going to be all the famer, he's got to start week 1. He's got.
No, that's not true. I even went on record and said Kittle. He was streaky. Kittle didn't start right away. I'm telling you, he's a Hall of Fame gold jacket guy.
Man, Amon-Ra St. Brown to me is like insurance, Sam. But is he like Swiss insurance?